The day I handed in my resignation letter, my boss looked me straight in the eyes. Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a shocked laugh, a real laugh. The kind of laugh someone gives when they are certain they still have power over you. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and smiled like she had already won. "Good luck finding another job," she said. Then she added something I will never forget. "Nobody in this industry will touch you." I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I did not give her the reaction she wanted. I just smiled, picked up my bag, and walked out. What she did not know was that I had already made one phone call, and that phone call was about to change everything she thought she controlled. This is my story. My name is Sarah. For 6 years, I gave everything I had to Meridian Solutions. When I say everything, I mean everything. I came in before most people had even started their commute. I stayed long after the cleaners had finished their rounds. I answered calls on weekends, on holidays, during family dinners, and once, even on my birthday. At first, I told myself it was worth it. Meridian was growing, and I believed I was growing with it. When I joined the company, the client relations department barely existed. There was no proper system, no clear onboarding process, no structure for handling renewals, complaints, upgrades, or major accounts. There were 12 active clients. 12. By my 5th year, we had 94. That did not happen by accident. I built the systems, I trained the team, I stayed on calls with angry clients until midnight. I rebuilt damaged relationships that everyone else had given up on. I created the reporting structure that the board later praised in every quarterly meeting. But my name was never attached to any of it. Not in company emails, not in presentations, not in board meetings, not in press releases. It was always Diana's strategy, Diana's leadership, Diana's vision. Diana was my boss. She was polished, confident, and very good at walking into a room after the work had already been done. She knew how to speak to executives. She knew how to use the right phrases. She knew how to make every success sound like it had started in her office. And for a long time, I let it happen. I told myself recognition was not everything. I told myself the work would speak for itself. I told myself people knew. That was the lie I kept repeating because it made the disrespect easier to swallow. Then came the promotion. The VP of Client Relations position opened up, and everyone knew I was the obvious choice. I had been preparing for that moment for 3 years. I had the experience, I had the client relationships, I had the numbers, I had the trust of the team. I spent months building a full plan for the department, projected growth targets, a new onboarding system, a retention strategy for high-value clients, a training plan for junior account managers. I went into that meeting ready. Diana called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact feeling as I walked down the hall. My heart was racing, but in a good way. I thought, this is it. Finally, she asked me to sit down. She smiled in that careful corporate way people smile when they already know they are about to disappoint you. "Sarah," she said, "we have decided to go in a different direction." For a second, I did not understand what she meant. Then she said the name. Marcus. They gave the promotion to Marcus, a man who had been at the company for 8 months. 8 months. He did not know the names of our top 10 clients. He had never handled a crisis account on his own. He still came to me for help before every major meeting, and now he was my boss. Diana kept talking, but I barely heard her. She said Marcus brought fresh energy. She said the company needed a new perspective. She said my role was still extremely valuable. That phrase stayed with me. Extremely valuable, just not valuable enough to promote. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and stared at my screen. For the first time in 6 years, I thought something I had never allowed myself to think before. Maybe I had been loyal to the wrong people. After Marcus got the promotion, everything changed. Not loudly at first. Small things. Meetings I used to lead were suddenly taken over by him. Ideas I had already presented were repeated by him, then praised by Diana. Clients who had known me for years were told to include Marcus on every call. I tried to stay professional. I told myself to give it time. Maybe he would learn. Maybe Diana would realize. Maybe the board would see the difference between someone who understood the department and someone who was simply good at looking confident in a meeting. But 2 months later, something happened that made everything clear. Diana called a department meeting. No warning, no explanation, just a calendar invite titled Team Update. The whole room felt tense before she even started speaking. People knew. You can feel bad news before it is said out loud. Diana stood at the front with Marcus beside her. She spoke in a calm voice, like she was announcing a software update instead of changing people's lives. There was going to be a restructure. That was the word she used. Restructure. Half of the client relations team was being cut. She blamed budgets. She blamed market conditions. She blamed operational efficiency. What she did not say was that she had already hired a cheaper outsourced firm to replace most of us. We found that out later. My colleague James was one of the people cut. James had been with Meridian for 15 years. 15 years of loyalty. He knew more about our clients than anyone in that building. He remembered birthdays, contract histories, old complaints, renewal patterns, personal details that made clients feel seen. He was the kind of employee companies say they value, but when the time came, they did not even give him a proper conversation. He found out by email on a Friday afternoon. I watched him pack his desk in silence. No speech, no farewell meeting, no thank you. Just a cardboard box and security standing too close. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger, something colder than anger. Clarity. I realized Diana was never going to respect loyalty. She was only going to use it. That night, I went home exhausted. I sat on my couch with my coat still on, phone in my hand, staring at nothing. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it. That night, I answered. A woman introduced herself as a headhunter. She said she represented a company called Vantage Group. I knew the name immediately. Everyone in our industry knew Vantage. They were sharp, aggressive, respected, and growing fast. She told me they had been watching my work for over a year, not Diana's work, mine. She mentioned client retention numbers I had built. She mentioned systems I had created. She mentioned accounts I had saved. For the first time in years, someone was speaking about my work, like they actually understood it. She asked if I would be open to a conversation. I almost said no. That is how deep the habit of loyalty had gone. Even after everything, part of me still felt guilty. But then I thought about James. I thought about Marcus sitting in the office I had earned. I thought about Diana smiling through every stolen success. So I said yes. We met the following Wednesday. I went in cautious. I left with my entire future rewritten. The offer they put on the table was more than I expected. 3 times my current salary, equity, full authority over client strategy, and a team of 22 people reporting directly to me. They did not ask me to prove my worth. They had already seen it. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I wrote my resignation letter. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian early. Not because I wanted to work, because I wanted to leave on my own terms. I printed the resignation letter and placed it in a plain white envelope. No drama, no long explanation, no emotional speech, just the facts. I had accepted another opportunity. My final day would be effective immediately. I walked to Diana's office and knocked once. She looked up from her laptop. "Sarah," she said, "can this wait?" "No," I said, "it cannot." That was the first time in 6 years I had spoken to her like that. She blinked, surprised. I placed the envelope on her desk. She opened it slowly. At first, her expression did not change. Then her eyes moved back to the top of the page. She read it again, and then she laughed. That laugh told me everything I needed to know. She did not think I had options. She did not think I had courage. She did not think I would ever leave. "Sarah," she said, leaning back in her chair, "nobody is going to pay you what you think you are worth." I said nothing. She kept going. "You have been here too long. You do not know how the real world works." Still, I said nothing. Then she smiled. "Good luck finding another job." There it was, the sentence she thought would break me, but it did not land the way she hoped, because I already had another job, a better job, a job she would have done anything to keep away from me. I looked at her for a moment, not with anger, not with sadness, with peace. Then I picked up my bag and walked out. No announcement, no goodbye tour, no final lap around the office begging people to understand, just the sound of my heels on the floor as I left Meridian Solutions for the last time. What Diana did not know was that Vantage Group was Meridian's biggest competitor. And in my first week there, I was handed a list of our priority target accounts. 11 of Meridian's top 12 clients were on that list. When I saw the names, I almost laughed. Not because it was easy, because for the first time, the work I had done for years was finally going to belong to me. My first week at Vantage was different from anything I had experienced at Meridian. People listened, not politely, actually listened. When I spoke about client behavior, retention risks, and contract timing, the room went quiet. They took notes. They asked smart questions. They gave me resources instead of excuses. At Meridian, I had spent years fighting to be heard. At Vantage, I was hired because they already knew I had something worth hearing. The target list was ambitious. 11 MAJ, or accounts. all connected to Meridian, all frustrated in different ways. Some were unhappy with slow response times. Some felt ignored after signing large contracts. Some had noticed the department becoming disorganized after the restructure, and some simply missed working with people who knew what they were doing. I did not need to attack Meridian. I did not need to mention Diana. I did not need to beg anyone to switch. I just did what I had always done. I listened. I remembered details. I solved problems. I gave clients the level of attention they had been asking for all along. Within 90 days, 7 of those 11 clients had signed with Vantage. 7. These were not small accounts. These were the accounts Diana used to brag about in board meetings, the accounts she called proof of her leadership, the accounts she never admitted I had helped build. Now they were gone, and Diana had no idea how to explain it. From what I heard, the first board meeting after the losses was brutal. Meridian's numbers had dropped hard. Revenue was down. Client retention was collapsing. Morale was worse than anyone wanted to admit. Marcus tried to explain it away. He blamed market shifts. He blamed client expectations. He blamed pricing pressure. Diana blamed the restructure. Then she blamed the outsourced firm. Then she blamed poor communication from the team she had already cut. But the board was not buying it, because the clients had not disappeared. They had gone somewhere else. They had gone to Vantage. Eventually, Meridian brought in an external consultant to investigate what had happened. That consultant used to work at Vantage Group. He knew the industry, he knew the accounts, and more importantly, he knew exactly what Sarah from Client Relations had been responsible for. His report was not kind. It said Meridian had failed to protect key client relationships. It said leadership had underestimated the value of institutional knowledge. It said the department restructure had damaged trust at the worst possible time. It did not say Diana destroyed her own client base by ignoring the person holding it together, but everyone understood. Diana was let go on a Thursday morning. No announcement, no farewell email, no warm thank you for her years of service. Just a quiet meeting, a security escort, and a cardboard box. I found out from James. Yes, James. The same 15-year employee she had fired by email. He had just started at Vantage. I hired him myself. When he walked into the office on his first day, he looked nervous, like he still expected someone to treat him as disposable. I showed him his desk. I introduced him to the team. Then I told him something I wish someone had told me years earlier. You are not lucky to be here. We are lucky to have you. He looked down for a second. Then he smiled. That moment meant more to me than Diana losing her job, because revenge is not always about watching someone fall. Sometimes it is about building the kind of place they never allowed you to have. I never went back to Meridian. I never needed to. Diana thought she was the gatekeeper. She thought she could decide who mattered. She thought taking credit was the same as creating. But value has a way of moving with the person who created it. And when I walked out of that office, I did not leave empty-handed. I left with my reputation, my relationships, my experience, my standards, everything Diana had spent years using without understanding. Sometimes the best revenge is not loud. Sometimes you do not need a scene. You do not need a speech. You do not need to prove anything to the people who refuse to see you. Sometimes you just show up somewhere better and let the results speak. If you have ever been underestimated at work, you know what Sarah felt. If you have ever watched someone take credit for what you built, you know how heavy that silence can become. If you have ever stayed loyal to people who only valued you when you were useful, you know how hard it is to finally walk away. But here is the truth. You do not have to beg for a seat at a table where people have already decided you do not belong. You do not have to keep shrinking yourself to make someone else feel powerful. You do not have to keep proving your worth to people who benefit from pretending they cannot see it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave quietly. No chaos, no warning, no desperate explanation. Just one decision that says, I know who I am, even if you never did. Diana laughed because she thought Sarah had nowhere to go. But Sarah did not need Diana's permission to move forward. She only needed one door to open. And once it did, everything changed. So let me ask you, what would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have stayed and fought? Would you have left sooner? Or would you have done exactly what she did and let karma handle the rest? Drop your answer in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, subscribe for more. I will see you in the next one.